Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where the greatest empire in human history never ended. No medieval castles, no Viking raids, no plague-ridden Dark Ages, no crusades, no world wars. Just Rome, eternal, unbroken, still standing. It sounds like a fantasy. But historians, scholars, and philosophers have debated this question for centuries. What if the Roman Empire never fell? Would humanity be more advanced, more peaceful, more united? Or would we be living under the boot of a 2,000-year-old authoritarian machine? The answer is far more complicated and far more fascinating than you might expect. Today, we're going to travel through time. We'll look at what actually brought Rome to its knees, explore the moment history could have changed, and trace the ripple effects all the way to a version of 2024 that looks almost nothing like the one we live in. This is one of the greatest what-ifs in all of human history. By the 4th century AD, the Roman Empire was the most powerful political entity the world had ever seen. At its peak, it controlled over 5 million square kilometers of territory across 3 continents. Its roads connected everything from the Scottish Highlands to the sands of the Sahara. But beneath that surface of strength, the cracks were already forming. The empire had grown too large to govern effectively. Corruption had eaten through every level of government. Tax collectors skimmed profits. Generals were more loyal to their own ambitions than to the emperor. To pay its soldiers, Rome began debasing its currency, putting less and less silver into its coins, triggering runaway inflation that wiped out ordinary citizens and destroyed confidence in the economy. And then there were the external pressures. From the east, the powerful Persian Empire pushed against Rome's borders. From the north, waves of Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns, pressed against the frontier with increasing ferocity. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. The city of Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths. For the first time in 800 years, a foreign enemy had breached the walls of the Eternal City. The psychological blow was devastating. Then, on September 4th, 476 AD, it was over. The last Roman emperor of the West, a teenage boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. Romulus was sent into exile, and just like that, the Western Roman Empire was gone. But what if it wasn't? What if, at the critical moment, Rome had found the leader it needed? A military genius, a political reformer, someone who sealed the borders, crushed the corruption, and bought Rome another century of stability. History turns on moments like these all the time. A different decision, a different leader, a battle won instead of lost. Let's say it happens. Rome survives. What comes next? The first and most dramatic consequence is something that doesn't happen: the Dark Ages. In our timeline, the centuries following Rome's fall were catastrophic. The sophisticated trade networks that had connected the entire empire collapsed. Cities shrank to tiny villages. Literacy rates plummeted. Aqueducts fell into disrepair. Roads were swallowed by forest. Libraries burned. None of that happens in our alternate timeline. Roman roads keep carrying goods across the continent. Roman law keeps protecting citizens and enabling commerce. Roman schools keep knowledge alive and building, and this changes everything about the pace of human progress. Think about the most transformative inventions in history: the printing press, 1440, the steam engine, the 1700s, germ theory, the 1800s. Every one of these was built on centuries of accumulated knowledge that was nearly destroyed by the chaos of Rome's fall. In a world where that chaos never happens, that entire timeline accelerates. Historians who have modeled this estimate humanity could have reached an industrial revolution as early as 1000 AD, 500 years ahead of schedule. Technologies we consider modern, electricity, vaccines, computers, could have existed for centuries by the time our calendar hits 2024. Now let's talk about religion. In our timeline, The fall of Rome was one of the most important events in the history of Christianity. The Church stepped into the power vacuum Rome left behind, becoming the keeper of knowledge, the legitimizer of kings, and the dominant political force in European life for over 1,000 years. In our alternate timeline, this doesn't happen. Christianity still spreads. It had already become Rome's official religion in 380 AD, but it never becomes the sole, unchallengeable authority. Rome was inherently pluralistic. Throughout its history, it absorbed dozens of different religions: Egyptian gods, Greek gods, Persian cults, Judaism. In a surviving empire, Christianity would be powerful, but checked by Roman secular authority and competing faiths. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the religious wars that devastated Europe, likely none of them happen. So, let's go to 2024. In the world where Rome never fell, the first thing you'd notice is the language. Latin, or a modern evolved form of it, is the global tongue. Every educated person speaks it. Every university teaches in it. Every legal document is written in it. Local languages still exist, but Latin ties the empire together the way English does in our world today. The empire itself spans the globe, not through brutal colonial violence, but through centuries of gradual expansion, trade, and the granting of Roman citizenship. Rome's great political innovation was the idea that anyone could become Roman, regardless of where they were born. That principle, extended over 2,000 years, has created a genuinely global Roman identity. Technology is staggering. With the Industrial Revolution arriving around 1000 AD, this civilization has had over 1,000 years to develop what came after it. Energy likely comes from fusion, clean and essentially unlimited. Medicine has conquered diseases that devastate our world. Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, effectively solved centuries ago. The average lifespan may be well over 100 years. And space. In our world, humans walked on the moon just 66 years after inventing powered flight. In a world where industrialization came 500 years earlier, this civilization has almost certainly left Earth far behind. Mars is likely colonized. Interstellar probes may already be on their way to nearby stars. But this world is not a utopia. An empire that has ruled for 2,000 years has had 2,000 years to perfect the machinery of control. The gap between the wealthy ruling class and ordinary citizens on the empire's fringes would be almost impossible to imagine. Slavery, central to the Roman economy, might have persisted far longer, evolving into sophisticated new forms of exploitation. And democracy, as we understand it, was never really a Roman concept. 2,000 years of imperial rule would have produced a population accustomed to obedience, not liberty. The Eternal Empire would be a civilization of breathtaking achievement and suffocating control, existing in constant tension with itself. The Roman Empire fell for dozens of reasons, but underneath all of them was a deeper truth. No human institution lasts forever. The same ambition that builds great things eventually overreaches. The same strength that conquers eventually becomes rigidity. The same order that creates stability eventually becomes oppression. Rome fell, but in falling, it gave birth to everything that came after. The chaos of the Dark Ages eventually forced humanity to innovate. The collapse of imperial authority eventually created the conditions for democracy, individual rights, and the modern world. Would we have gotten there without the fall? Maybe. Eventually, in some different form. But here's what we know for certain. Rome's shadow never left us. We still use its calendar. We still live under legal systems it invented. We still speak languages that evolved from its tongue. We still govern ourselves with concepts it pioneered. Every time you use the word republic, every time you stand in a building with columns, every time you look at the month of August on your calendar, named for Emperor Augustus himself, Rome is still here. In a very real sense, the Roman Empire never fell at all. If this video made you think, drop your take in the comments. Would you want to live in an eternal Roman Empire? Would the technological advancement be worth the loss of freedom? Subscribe for a new What If every single week. I'll see you in the next one. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want to understand the real Rome, the one that actually existed, the next video is already waiting for you. Because the true story of how Rome rose, ruled, and fell is just as extraordinary as any alternate history we could imagine. The Roman legions that held the frontier for centuries, the engineers who built roads so perfectly that some of them still exist today, the philosophers who asked questions about justice and power and human nature that we are still trying to answer, the ordinary citizens, the farmers, the merchants, the slaves, whose lives were shaped by forces far beyond their control, just like ours are today. History is never just about the great men and the famous battles. It's about the millions of ordinary people caught up in something larger than themselves. And Rome, more than almost any civilization in history, gives us a window into what it means to build something that lasts, and what it costs. So whether you're here for the what-ifs, or for the real history, or just because you find it endlessly fascinating that 2,000 years later, we are still talking about a city built on 7 hills beside a river in central Italy, welcome. You're in the right place. New video every week. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you next time. There's one more thing worth sitting with before we close. We live in a world today that sometimes feels like it's coming apart at the seams. Political divisions, economic instability, wars on multiple continents, a sense that the institutions we built, the ones we trusted to hold everything together, are cracking under pressures they weren't designed to handle. The Romans felt that too. In the final decades of the Western Empire, ordinary people could see what was happening. They watched the currency lose its value. They watched the roads fall into disrepair. They watched the government become more corrupt, more distant, more unable to protect them from the dangers closing in from every direction. Many of them had no idea they were living through the fall of civilization. They just knew that things kept getting a little worse, year after year, and that the world their grandparents had described seemed very far away. And yet, Rome didn't disappear. It transformed. The Latin language became French and Spanish and Italian and Portuguese and Romanian. Roman law became the foundation of legal systems across the entire Western world. Roman engineering principles were studied and revived during the Renaissance and shaped every major building project for the next 500 years. The Catholic Church, Roman in its structure, its hierarchy, its use of Latin, carried the memory of Rome into the modern age. Civilizations don't really die. They change shape. They pass things forward, sometimes deliberately, and sometimes without even knowing it. And the things they pass forward, the ideas, the technologies, the ways of organizing human life, take on new forms in new hands, and eventually become something their creators would barely recognize. That's true of Rome. And someday, it will be true of us too.